Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Education System Reboot channel. I wanted to reflect on this personal story, a personal idea, but about, again, when's the right time to introduce a new skill. So, just up front, this video is going to have a lot of explanation. And so, I hope that I tie it all in together. Um, but the reason I'm thinking about this specific thing is we had a little festival for my youngest band. It's called the Developing Band Festival. And first of all, it was a good experience for these kids, especially after COVID. Again, I don't want to bore you with all the like nitty gritty of the things that aren't important. Um, but one of the feedback that was given, and it's something that's been given to my bands throughout my entire career. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to try to explain this a little bit. And this will be a very music centered video. So for those of you that aren't musicians, hopefully you can take away something productive. Okay, so here's the background I think that you need to know. As a professional musician and somebody who's, again, played with some high end players and has spent a lot of time reflecting on what does it take to be a great French horn player, but also just a good, quality professional musician in general. There are a lot of skills that have to be developed. You have to be able to produce a beautiful tone all the time. You have to be able to play the entire range of your specific instrument at a high level. There's a thing called dynamics, which basically means how loud or soft you play. And so you have to be able to do all of those things all the time. There's a technique called articulation, which is how you, as a brass player, is how we use the tongue. Woodwind, same thing. That could be the articulation of the bow or the string, of how they do that in string instruments. And so all of these skills, and each skill that I just mentioned has little sub skills. I mean, there's tons of things that have to be developed, but they all have to be developed at a very, very high level. Now, in the band world, there is a concept called the balance pyramid. And the idea behind it is that if you're going to have a beautiful sound for your band, you need to have more of the lower sounding instruments to support the higher instruments. And so the higher instruments should play softer. Now, again, this is all for me relevant information. So one of the things in my own development and developing to the highest professional level, playing softly on your instrument is a skill that has to be developed, but it has to be sequenced right. Like it has to be, in my opinion, it has to be introduced at the right time. And for me personally, especially when I'm trying to develop really good, like French horn students or really good, players on all the instruments, I try not to introduce playing soft too early. Most band directors, because they believe in this balanced pyramid, they, as early as possible, they try to get kids to start playing soft to get dynamics, which again, let me just be upfront. Kids at all levels should learn what dynamics are and should learn how to play them. But dynamics, in terms of how loud or soft you play, are a relative concept. They are relative to where you are in your development. So, okay, so now I'm going to tie it back to the festival. The person who was giving feedback, and again, I would say I would give the same feedback that he gave to a more advanced ensemble. But as a young developing band, I personally would never give this feedback. But his feedback was about playing soft and trying to balance the instruments. And again, his feedback is right because it would make the music sound a little better. But the feedback, in my opinion, is wrong because developmentally, it's the wrong time to introduce it. And here's why. To develop a beautiful sound soft, you must learn to push air. You must learn to develop a great full sound first. Most kids in sixth, seventh, eighth, even ninth grade haven't really fully developed a beautiful, full, rich sound. Partly because band directors tend to always say, play softer, play softer, play softer. So again, this is a personal philosophy, okay? But the idea would be, as young band kids, I always encourage them to play louder, louder. Now, granted, I will talk about dynamics, but I won't try to get them to play soft because here's what happens. Most kids, if you ask them to play softer, they slow down their air. They don't support the air. So instead of a good sound soft, they just are playing softer with a bad sound, right? Now, I'm going to kind of pause there and just say, look, if there is a music person that listens to this and they disagree, that is completely fine. I just know what has worked for me in the development of professional horn players, what's developed in my bands over the years. And I've always believed, just so this is the thing, this is my belief. I believe that having kids try to play too soft when they haven't developed a good sound is never going to allow the student to develop fully. So this goes back to when is the right time to introduce concepts. Now, since this is an education channel, not just a music channel, I think the question itself is the important part. As a teacher, are we constantly asking ourselves this question, is this the right time to introduce this? So again, what are some things? Students need to have scaffolded, they need to have a foundation, right? You don't just throw things out. It needs to build on top of it. So going back to the dynamic or the tone issue in music, the fundamental skill is a student has to develop a nice, big, full sound, loud, right? So it's supported. Now, what they have to do is they have to learn to take that and really, it's almost like you turn down the volume knob. So it's the same sound. It always sounds the same, but it's just softer. But that requires using your air in a specific way. And most kids in 6th, 7th, 8th, and like I said, even 9th grade, they aren't even going to be aware or able to control the air. And so what's going to happen is the sound will suffer. So again, trying to tie this all back. Talked about a balance pyramid. So for me personally, I never push the balance pyramid. I'm always kind of pushing this idea of full sound, full volume all the time. As they develop a sound, then I start saying, okay, now, what's your role? Are you an important melody instrument? Are you a bass instrument? Do you have something that should be heard against the melody? Are you what we call accompaniment? So then what I do is, okay, as long as you have a good sound, you need to learn how to balance those voices, right? So if it says to play loud, well, you can play loud, but you can't cover the melody. So for me, balancing an ensemble is about melody versus harmony versus bass versus accompaniment versus all these things. So I don't just say play softer, right? I say, learn, always make a good sound. Okay, now I'm going a little too much music here. So my experience in my district, and again, I know other people in other districts, but my experience is a lot of students are being asked to do things that they have no foundation for. And so, again, my encouragement would be as a teacher to ask yourself, have I taught the necessary things? Is this the right time to introduce this concept? Sometimes that could be a skill. Sometimes that could be a topic, right? There are some topics that maybe kids are not ready for. And I would also say, again, I'm finding it difficult at times, but we have to obviously take into account the COVID effect, right? So what normally would be what you normally introduce pre-COVID, you might have to say, whoa, they missed skills. So you might have to backfill. You might have to develop a different unit to backfill missing skills. I don't know. But again, the experience of the festival got me thinking about how we should always be asking what are the true skills that are needed to play at the highest level or perform at the highest level or have the highest level of education. And then we backwards design it. And so again, going back to the music analogy, my backwards design, my analytical brain has realized that if you get kids too early thinking about playing soft, they tend to develop bad habits in their playing. So it's something that I personally try to avoid. Now, it doesn't mean, again, that I don't suggest or talk about dynamics. I just try to really be clear about how to make a good sound. And so everything in my routines, everything in the way I encourage them to play, everything in the way of balancing. Today in band, I was talking about not playing softer to balance, but balancing up to the loudest voice. So if one person was sticking out in the texture, I didn't say that one person come down. I said everyone match that person so that you're playing louder. Now, again, a side note, just because I kind of proved this to myself. So in my early career, I taught at a high school in the Salem-Keizer area. And the first 2 years that I was there, every festival, I got the same comment. You've got some strong players and they're overpowering the band, okay? So a normal band director would take that as, okay, they need to play softer. But because I had already decided through experience and through just my own philosophy that playing softer, you have to develop a big sound first. So what did I do? Every time I got that feedback. I recognized why they were telling me the feedback, but I recognized as well that it was just too early in the development. So what did I do? I encouraged all my other, I'm using this term, weaker players, the players that weren't sticking out, to match them. By the third year that I was teaching at this band in Salem, I never heard that comment again. Why? Because instead of taking the few individuals and having them play softer, I kept encouraging all the other players to play bigger, fuller. And then what happened is, now that the whole band had developed a bigger, fuller sound, I could then start adjusting dynamics. So again, to tie this all in, I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. Knowing when to introduce a concept is important. If you introduce it at the wrong time, the whole developmental process can be skewed or even deleted or diminished. And I don't want that. And so again, if you're a music teacher and you come across this, that is my advice. Again, my opinion, but my experience has told me the balanced pyramid is a bad educational concept. It's a great concept for professional ensembles. It's a terrible developmental process. But you get lots of feedback and lots of band directors that will say, well, to balance, to sound better, you need to play softer. But if you're a sixth grader, seventh grader, eighth grader, to me, that's the absolute wrong thing. So if you're a teacher in another subject, I know you have to kind of retool this, but I bet you there's things you could think about where you want this certain goal and you want to introduce a concept, but the timing of the concept might not actually get the result you want. And I think that's the message here. Does introducing a certain concept, is it truly getting you the long-term result you want? Or is it just that you're checking it off, like, oh, it's just the right thing to say, or, oh, I got to get this in my curriculum. Oh, I'm supposed to do this standard. And I think that is something that we could really work on and improve on in education is, I guess it's being more purposeful. Okay. All right. So hopefully this all made sense. I know if you follow the whole thing, I know I'm talking for 12 minutes. But hopefully that all ties in. And again, I try to look for connections in life so that something that I might learn in band could be connected to another subject, could be connected to life. So I'm constantly looking for those connections. And so I like to speak in kind of metaphors and analogies and connections of things. So hopefully, if you're not a music person, something about what I said can still work in your subject. But I had been thinking about this all since last week, and I just wanted to get it down on here. So as always, thank you. And consistent effort over time equals success. See you next time.